Hey guys, this is the 13th video in the Great Spiritual Awakening series. Today we're going to talk about how God is all-knowing. This video has 3 parts. First, we'll learn 4 principles of understanding God. Second, we'll learn 3 possible ways that God is all-knowing. And third, we'll learn about the eternal nature of consciousness and how this guides us toward the all-knowing nature of God. Now let's begin. For many years, people have said God is all-knowing, but what does it mean to be all-knowing? It means that God knows what everyone is thinking, feeling, and experiencing. God knows what Chow, a boy in China, is thinking, feeling, and experiencing. And God knows what Martin, a boy in America, is thinking, feeling, and experiencing. God knows what everyone is experiencing, including animals. Also, if God is all-knowing, then that means God knows what will happen in the distant future, and God knows what happened in the distant past. This is what it means to be all-knowing. Part 1. Before we can understand how God is all-knowing, we must first understand 4 principles of understanding God. The first principle of understanding God is that God must make sense to us. Here's why. We can understand what is happening in our universe. We can understand why stars and planets have round shapes. We can even calculate the sizes and masses of stars and planets. Moreover, we can understand the movements of stars and planets. We can calculate their movements. If God created the world around us, God must be sensible and intelligent because we can understand the world around us. However, if God was not sensible and intelligent, then our world wouldn't make any sense to us. Planets and stars would have unusual random shapes. For example, some planets would be shaped like candy canes, and some planets would be shaped like elephants, and some stars would be shaped like cats, and sometimes they would explode with random things like confetti. What's more, the movement of these objects would be random. We wouldn't be able to make sense of the world around us, but the reality is, we don't live in this world. The world that we do live in makes a lot of sense to us. Therefore, God the Creator must make a lot of sense to us. If we go down a path where God makes no sense at all, then we're going down the wrong path. We would not be getting a closer understanding of God. We would be completely misunderstanding God. The second principle of understanding God is that we must focus on the fundamental aspects of God. For example, God is all-knowing and God is all-present. These are 2 fundamental aspects of God. A non-fundamental aspect of God is God's appearance. Let's say many people believe God has white skin and brown eyes. Now here's the question. If you meet someone that has white skin and brown eyes, does that mean you've met God? No, not necessarily. But if you meet someone that is all-knowing and all-present, does that mean you've met God? Yes, of course it does. You see, we have to focus on the fundamental aspects of God because that's the key to understanding God. The third principle of understanding God is that we must be able to accept the idea that God cannot do supernatural things. Religion has taught us that God can do supernatural things. For example, God can separate the Red Sea, and God can speak to people through burning bushes. Because many people believe these events happened, people think of God as someone who can do supernatural things. Some people believe God can throw lightning bolts from his hands and shoot lasers with his eyes, but this may be the furthest thing from the truth. This is why it's so important to be open to the idea that God doesn't have supernatural abilities. After all, our end goal is to have a true understanding of God. And the fourth principle of understanding God is that we must be able to accept the idea that we are God. Religion tells us that we are not God. It tells us that God is so much greater than we can ever be, but this may not be the truth. You see, if you read the major religious books, none of them explain how God is all-knowing. Religious books tell us God wants you to do this, and God wants you to do that. And religious books tell us God will punish you for not doing this, and God will punish you for not doing that. Religious books contain many different rules that the authors want you to follow, and there are severe punishments for not following the rules. But religious books don't give us a deeper understanding of what God is. How can God be all-knowing? What does it mean for God to be all-present? There are no answers to these questions in religious books. Religious books cannot tell you that you are God, but there's a reason for this. You see, the books have so many rules and punishments for not following those rules. If the books stated that you are God, then you would not follow any of the rules. You would just say, forget this, I'm going to live by my own rules. The only way the religious books can get you to follow its rules is by telling you that you are not God, and God is so much greater than you will ever be, and God will punish you for your mistakes. That's the only way religious books can get you to follow its rules. If the religious book stated that you are God, then you wouldn't be interested in following the rules in the book. My point is, we must be open to the idea that we are God because that's a real possibility. Part 2. Now let's look at 3 possible ways that God is all-knowing. First, God is not a single being, but rather God is many invisible beings, and God watches each and every one of us all the time. This idea doesn't make any sense for several reasons. How can God know what you're thinking and feeling by watching you from the outside? If God is an outside observer, then he wouldn't be able to know what you're thinking and feeling. Also, God has to constantly observe people, but there may be times when God becomes distracted. Therefore, God may fail to observe certain people. What's more, if God is many different observers, how does each observer know what the other observers know? Each God would only have information about the person he is observing, which means each God would not be able to know what other people are doing and thinking. For these reasons, it doesn't make sense to think that God is many invisible observers. The second possible way that God is all-knowing is through a second consciousness. We are all conscious beings, but God is a second consciousness that exists within us. This second consciousness, which we will call God consciousness, is connected to a single source. Therefore, God is able to know what people in China are experiencing, while also knowing what people in India are experiencing, while also knowing what people in America are experiencing. But there is a big problem with this idea. Imagine there are 1,000 people that are reading 1,000 different books to you at the same time. Could you understand 1,000 different stories at the same time? No, of course not. You see, consciousness can only really understand one story at a time. Similarly, if God is consciousness, then God cannot know what everyone is thinking and feeling and doing at the same time. It's not possible, and it's not reasonable to believe such an idea. Remember, near the beginning of this video, we learned that if we go down a path where God makes no sense at all, then we're going down the wrong path. The idea that God is a second consciousness within each of us, and this second consciousness is connected to a single source, makes no sense because God cannot know everything that is happening at the same time. The third possible way that God is all-knowing is if we are God. Some people may be uncomfortable with the idea that we are God, but actually, this is the least creepy idea of the 3 possibilities. You see, if God is an invisible being that is following you around, that's a very creepy thing. Also, if God is a second consciousness that is aware of everything you're doing and thinking, that is also a very creepy idea. However, if we are God, then that's the least creepy idea. Therefore, you shouldn't be uncomfortable with the idea that we are God. You might be wondering, if we are God, how are we all-knowing? To answer this question, we must first understand consciousness, aka the soul. Now let's briefly learn about children who remember their past lives. Part 3. Researchers at the University of Virginia have documented over 1,500 cases of children who remember their past lives. Oftentimes, the children begin talking about their past lives at about the same times that they learn how to speak. Many of the children can remember the names of past life family and friends. They're able to remember family events and family secrets. They're able to know the locations of their past life homes and the changes that were made to the homes since their deaths. And they're able to pick out their past life belongings even when it's mixed with other people's belongings. What's more, about 35% of the children who remember their past lives have birthmarks and/or birth defects in the same locations as past life injuries. I've made many videos on children who remember their past lives. If you're interested to learn more, you can check out my playlist on reincarnation after this video. The link will be in the description. If reincarnation is real, then that means consciousness existed before birth and consciousness survives death. The only way this is possible is if consciousness is immaterial. In other words, consciousness exists outside of space and time. But here's the interesting thing. If consciousness exists outside of space and time, then consciousness cannot be created. You cannot use rocks to create consciousness, and you cannot use wood to create consciousness. Consciousness cannot be created at all. Also, if consciousness exists outside of space and time, then consciousness cannot be destroyed. You cannot destroy consciousness with bullets, and you cannot destroy consciousness with explosives. Consciousness cannot be destroyed at all. Now here's where things get really interesting. If consciousness cannot be destroyed, then that means we will always exist in the future, and it means our future is infinite. If our future is infinite, then time is always moving forward. Similarly, if consciousness cannot be created, then that means we always existed in the past, and it means our past is infinite. If our past is infinite, then time is always moving backward. Consciousness cannot be created, which indicates that time is moving backward, and consciousness cannot be destroyed, which indicates that time is moving forward. How can time move forward and backward? The word backward means toward the backside. If time is moving to its backside, then that means time is moving toward the past. There are two possible ways that time can move to the past. The first way is by moving in the counterclockwise direction. Here, you can see a man going from the water to the boat. The video is playing in reverse, but in reality, this never happens. Time doesn't move in the counterclockwise direction. The second way time can move toward the past is by moving in a time loop. You may have seen TikTok videos and YouTube shorts that play in a loop. A video loop is when the same video plays over and over again because the past is connected to the future. Similarly, in a time loop, the past and future are connected to one another. If the past and future are connected to one another, then that means history will repeat itself. Dinosaurs existed in the past, and dinosaurs will exist in the future. Albert Einstein existed in the past, which means Albert Einstein will exist in the future. Reincarnation teaches us that the end of one life is connected to the beginning of a new life. Simply put, it teaches us that the end and beginning are connected to one another. Similarly, if time is moving in a loop, then that means the end of time is connected to the beginning of time. As you know, reincarnation means the end of one journey is connected to the beginning of a new journey. You have experienced a series of many lives in this cycle of time, but in the next cycle of time, you will experience a different series of lives. You may experience the life of your mother in the next cycle of time, or you may experience the life of your father in the next cycle of time. Because time moves in a loop forever, you will experience everyone's life in the future, and because the past and future are connected to one another, you have already experienced everyone's life in the past. That means I am a past and future version of you. Likewise, you are a past and future version of me. We are all past and future versions of one another. In the beginning of this video, we learned that God is all-knowing, and the word all-knowing means to know what everyone is thinking, feeling, and doing. We are all-knowing because we share our lives with one another. We are all-knowing and we are all present. Understanding consciousness is the key to understanding God. But here's the thing, so many people believe consciousness is merely created by brain activity, and so many people don't believe in God. God is not a being with supernatural powers. God is the infinite journey of consciousness. If you want to know more about God, check out my book, The Great Spiritual Awakening. Also, I just want to mention that I talk about time moving in a loop in the 6th video of the Great Spiritual Awakening series. So if you're a bit confused about the idea of time moving in a loop, then that video will give you more information on the topic. Hey guys, if you're looking for a thought-provoking spiritual book, check out The Great Spiritual Awakening. The link is in the description. And in the next video, we will look at evidence of telepathy. Click on the thumbnail to watch the video, and last but not least, have an amazing, wonderful day.